Welcome to Peoples and Things, where we explore human life with technology. I'm Lee Vinsel. At one point, I was working on a book proposal called Why Software Fails, which some of it got folded into my A Good History of Shit Jobs project, and who knows, maybe I'll go back to it at some point. And the proposed book was about, well, why software fails, and it fails in all kinds of ways, not just stuff involving bugs, but like massive enterprise software adoption failures that lead to huge lawsuits between companies. And I don't know, have you ever noticed how much of the software in your life that you use on a daily basis is just like deeply mediocre? Just like, so uninspired, second-rate, unremarkable, lackluster. But the more I looked into the topic, the more I saw a kind of classic technology studies theme emerge, which is that whatever problem is in a technology arises from a problem in human thinking and or social relating, which could be in the design, the build, its implementation, maintenance, or management and end use, wherever. And I joked to myself that I should just write a book called On Human Mediocrity. But my buddy and co-author Andy Russell put it in a different way when we were working on the innovation delusion, probably based on our experiences working at, so-so universities. Andy asked, what if mediocrity is actually okay? What if it's even good in a variety of ways? Or you could put it this way. You could ask, what if this is as good as it gets? And that's often good enough as long as it gets the job done. I see a similar but even stronger line of reasoning in this direction in Paula Bialski's new book, Middletech, Software Work in the Culture of Good Enough. Paula is an associate professor of digital sociology at the University of St. Gallen in St. Gallen, Switzerland, as well as a member of the folk pop group Paula and Karol, whose music I was listening to as I prepped for this interview. I thought it was quite lovely. I've been following Paula's work for years now, and through deep ethnographic research, she describes an average firm that does work that's, well, it's good enough. And Paula goes further and really highlights the good in good enough, even sometimes to suggest that a humane culture requires a sense of limits and even a bit of grace or gratitude or forgiveness. I also simply had tremendous fun talking to Paula, and you are totally going to see that. And I probably don't even have to say it because you're going to simply feel it directly in your energy body. But rules are rules. And so I say, hey, get excited! Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Hi, Lee. So nice to meet you finally. I've really loved your work on maintainers. I'm going to plug your work as well.
Thank you.
But finally meeting you, it's lovely.
It's there are a lot of maintenance themes in this new book of yours.
True.
And as we were talking about before we pressed record, I've known you were working on this for like years, and it was like I was really excited to see it finally come out. So tell us about Middletech, your book, and, what it's about and what you were trying to do with it, if you were, explaining it to a stranger.
Okay, yes, and it is embarrassingly long how long I've worked on it, but anthropologists, sociologists, ethnographers, we all do this stuff for a long time.
Yeah,
it's normal.
exactly.
It's normal.
Yeah,
so I'm trying to tell myself it's okay. So you want the pitch, the elevator pitch of, oh man, this is tough. But it's always tough for academics to be succinct and throw in a few sentences. But I wanted to do two things. One thing, I wanted to really tell the other side of the story that we hear about digital media technologies It's not the Elon Musks. It's not the Zuckerbergs. It's not Silicon Valley. It's also a whole other world that's out there, especially these Middletech companies, what I named this book, which are the companies that maintain our digital systems, that have digital assets that are used in different kinds of hardware, in our cars, in our phones, in our, traffic light systems, etc. And that story is extremely important. It's not sexy, it's not exciting sometimes, but I wanted to make it exciting in some way. So that's like really the one of the pitches. I think I have like these two sides of this book a little bit. And then I wanted to really, this is how I kind of got into it, right? I was like, I'm going to study this like boring Middletech company in Berlin. I'm going to do that. But then I think that's the front end of the story. The back end, what happened in the end, is that this is a story also that pushes back against the narrative of excellence, of seamlessness, of awesomeness, that our technology is going to save the world, that it's in like smart cities, everything's smart and amazing and AI and connected. No, actually, our technology is just good enough. It's not awesome, amazing, cool, whatever. It's just like, it's sometimes just good enough to function, to exist. Sometimes it breaks down and then you just try to fix it. And it's really just that. So it is faulty from the get-go when you're creating it. And I want to tell that story. So that's the pitch.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how did you get into mediocrity? I mean, like, how does that happen? It's like,
so I didn't, of course, so basically there's a whole other story and I can get into that later of how I got into this company. This was a company that is not many people really have heard about. I can't really reveal the name of this company.
Sure,
I like you a lot, Lee, but I'm not going to give you the like secret sauce of it. But it is like kind of a mid-sized kind of big-ish tech company in Berlin. But you haven't heard of it. It builds like navigation software and it's a company that like not many people have heard of, and also makes technology that we don't really see, right? That's like invisible. That's not like something that we always, need to download or need to update. It updates in the background and stuff. So that's one way where I got into like this idea of mediocrity, but I didn't really want to figure, because mediocrity has a negative connotation. I think I don't really only want to focus on mediocrity. In this book, it's really about what does it mean when we make technology that's just good enough? And what if we work in a good enough way? So it's really about good enough work and good enough software, but it's not really, mediocrity. I was using mediocrity at the beginning, but it's not really about that, because I think good enoughness is also good. It's also like sometimes just okay. It's about non-excellence, I guess, but it's not always about like the badness of mediocrity. It's kind of the goodness of mediocrity.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm totally. And I'm being slightly ironic, but it's also like, I think I've learned a lot from my buddy Andy Russell here, because I think it might come out a bit in the Innovation Delusion where we talk about mediocrity, but whatever we say, it's Andy saying it, wrote those parts, because I think Andy he's like, take back the meaning of mediocrity. That's like his approach.
Yes, exactly.
And I think for him, it's like, a lot of us end up in these kind of mediocre universities, actually. Like, they're like, and like, that's like the good enough, the good enough school. You know what I mean? And like, actually most universities in the world are good enough in variety of ways. And so for him, I think it became like really important to be like, you know what? Yeah, it's mediocre and it's fine. So it's like exactly. Taking it back in that way. Yeah,
it's true. I want to take it back, but also this like, I want to challenge this like notion of excellence, which is just about metrics, right? Like a university and money, of course. It has have a lot to do with like, I don't know, you're talking about universities, of course, the universities that rank in an amazing way and do amazing things. This is really also a myth, an illusion, as you also talked about the illusion of innovation that you and Andy Russell talk about. I think there's this like illusion that things are excellent. Like, what are these standards that we're looking up against? And I know that some people who build also software sometimes have to say, well, if there's really integral and crucial software, we don't want an airplane to crash, right? We don't want certain systems have to try to strive to be excellent. So there's this like I have to slow down for the listener and for ourselves, because there's too many things that we have in here. I'm just so excited to say this. But there's like an excellence narrative that has to do with safety, right? And like an engineering excellence. Let's talk about that. And then there's the managerial excellence. That's like a different type of excellence.
I'm with you. I think that there's where I was getting caught up is in my head is, first of all, rankings. A lot of this is about metrics and rankings. And a lot of that is total and utter horseshit. Like, just bad. Like, and there's a lot of really good books out in the last couple of years just saying, don't even play the ranking games at universities, right? But then, like, I was thinking about, like, engineering programs at MIT or humanities departments at Princeton or whatever versus what you have at a school even as...
Like St. Gallen.
Or St. Gallen or Virginia Tech, frankly, you know? Okay. And, like, I think there's differences in quality. But I actually think that, but the reality is that the majority of schools that are not MIT and Princeton are doing most of the training and educating. They're really important. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's like, like thinking about like good enough is good enough if depending on what we're trying to get done. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And there's also an emphasis, I think, for me on good. So this book, my book is really, as I mentioned a little bit, I spent, I think, so around over 6 months intensively, but on and off for 2 years with this company, with the people in the company, with front-end engineers, back-end engineers. And I think that there's a story that I say at the end, I spent all this time, and then there's these few engineers. I kind of have the ending of my conclusion of the book is this goodbye party at this beer garden in Berlin, and they're all saying goodbye, these engineers, to these two kind of star engineers that leave for sort of the Microsofts and the Googles of the world, right? And the other guys stay in the good enough environment. And they kind of, there's this anecdote that I tell in the story where they ask me, okay, what is your book about? And then I'm like, it's about good enoughness. It's about your tech company that I call Middletech. And they were all like, what? Like so offended, right? I try to like, this is my dream also of the people in this book is like, embrace that and like enjoy that. The people who I talk to, these guys who went to the Googles and the Facebooks, you talk to them, and on one hand, it's okay, but on the other hand, it's a rat race. They're constant competition.
You're fucking miserable.
It's miserable. Yeah. It's like, and these guys can go to say goodbye to their like kids in the morning, and they can pick them up in the afternoon. They can go for beers in the afternoon. There's so many beautiful things that you embrace life and you embrace like a balance of what it means to kind of live as a human. And I don't even want to use the term work-life balance, because some people are like, your book is about work-life balance. No, the work-life balance is what like people from the corporate sort of world use to justify making people work for very long. So I think there's also some people who use that term work-life balance and critique it. And I don't want to use that. It's really about embracing the fact that you don't have to be excellent, and that's really great. And
it's a form of goodness.
Yeah, it's a form of goodness, exactly.
Yeah. One of my siblings just was, a fairly high-ranking, like a high-level administrator in the Chicago public school system, and like stepped down a level because my brother realized he was going to have more time and be able to live and have more time with his children.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So the guys in the beer garden, I was talking to them, and some of them get it, but again, it was very hard for them because they thought, well, I am also look as a failure in the world that I live in, right? I get that if you live in a corporate world, you are not in the kind of cool, sexy, big 5, big 6, whatever you call it, tech companies. You are working in that world, but what a wonderful life. Like I've also speaking back to your examples of the university life, I mean, I talk to some of my friends at Ivy League schools, and they listen to my life. And again, we're talking about like now high privilege here. And I'll talk about these tech workers as well. They are highly privileged, the ones who I study too. But she also say, hey, wow, I would love to live in a little Swiss village and like pick my kid up from school. And I work at, an Ivy League, and this is really, really tough, So
yeah, I'm with you. I'm working in my creek a lot these days. So yes.
Creek?
Yeah,
on the river.
I have a creek on my property, and I just hang out in it. And so,
Oh,
yes, I'm
nice.
like, I'm with you.
How do you work on a creek? What do you do? Like
I'm
to
creating
help
like
beaver
a garden
dams?
area.
Oh,
I'm not really damming. I'm changing the flow a little
wow.
bit in one area, but I'm creating a kind of
You're a
picnic
beaver.
area down there,
Oh,
with paving stones and stuff, so we can
oh,
like
it
dangle
sounds
our feet in the creek and blah
that's
blah
really nice.
blah.
It's very good.
So I'm with you. I mean, I think there's within privilege, there's still choices to be made. I wanted to talk to you about some intellectual predecessors on this stuff. And one I wanted to talk to you about anyway, Herb Simon is very important to me because Herbert Simon, who had the idea of satisficing,
Yes, 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 yes.
he's important to me because I went to Carnegie Mellon where he was for decades and his ghost loomed large. I read a lot of his stuff. So I'm going to talk to you about that and where he fits in things for you. An angle I didn't think about before I read your book and you highlighted for me was Darwinian evolution. So I wanted to talk to you
Ah,
about Herbert Simon and Darwin as like predecessors for thinking about good enoughness.
huh. I must admit that I'm not your like extreme theorist. Of course,
Yeah.
I've read Simon, and the Darwinism thing comes from there's few people who read about good enoughness
Uh
and
huh.
the term good enough. I know Avram Alpert's work.
Uh
He
huh.
wrote a book on good enough from Princeton, and there's another. I need to name drop. I'm not so good at name drop. So I'm not the best name dropper. Basically, I'm not like someone who first starts with theory and then like goes out into the field. I really am such a like straight up ethnographer. I can just spend hours. So I don't really work
Hallelujah.
like that. I know hallelujah, but I don't really work. I don't know if I would say it's even
Yeah.
intellectual predecessors to even a thought. I think some
You
people
were
would
just
even like
looking for
look at
like
me
similarities or something like
or
that.
even I just thought
Yeah.
something's happening here, and then I
Yeah.
even thought about good enoughness, and then, or never you thought about. I heard an engineer say there is this term when we say good enoughness, it's good enough. Look up any engineer, look up Hacker News, and this is always this term good enoughness is among the engineering vernacular. So it came out of the field, and then I thought,
Yeah.
who actually works on good enoughness, right?
Yeah.
And there was this like term, the good enough mother, that was coined by a few pediatricians, I think, who are from Canada, who are writing about motherhood and about what it means to actually be like an actual realistic mother versus like this mother or mother, aka parent. I think this was written, I
Yeah.
don't know, in the 70s, right? So we're still talking here of this term of motherhood, but it's like kind of this idea of excellence, and you're actually hurting your child if you try for excellence. You are better and stronger if you give yourself this like understanding that you are just good enough. And now we know
Yeah.
that in parenting and da, 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 but this is like where it really came from in a more, let's call it, I don't know, social setting, even though this came
Yeah.
from like pediatrics, I think, right? And I forgot who this was, honestly, because yeah.
That's okay.
So
I suck at proper names too, so I'm with you.
yeah, okay. So this
Yeah.
is like where it came from, but like yes, I also get satisficing from Simon, and there's a few people who wrote about good enoughness. And in Darwinism, who was this? I have to look this up. I forgot even who did this. And anyways, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, it sounds like you're an empiricist. Are you a grounded
Yes.
theory person or like or-
Yeah. I'm kind of yes, I could say you're a grounded theory person. I think people who spend a lot. I think I'm a sociologist turned anthropologist in some ways.
Yeah.
My world is very much in also science and technology studies, but really from the world of anthropology. My husband's an anthropologist, and he kind of really looked at what I did maybe even earlier in my research before I even met him before this project. And he thought, wow, I can't believe you just spend like a few weeks in the field and then you're done, right?
Yeah.
And just let everything seep through you. So definitely I think the groundedness is important to like let your body understand the world in some way. And of course you're seeing through yourself, your body, your angle, your eyes, etc., your I don't know, sex, your gender, blah blah blah. But it's important to let it seep in. So that's why I spent that much longer period of time, which I haven't done in other projects. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. And I think that really sets up my next question really nicely, which is you had this nice line about what you hope to do, what you were trying to do in this book was write or like, examine what you call the cultural aspects of good enoughness in practice. And I feel like that's a very anthropological, ethnographic way of like thinking through this, is to say that you're spending all this time with these folks and really looking at like practices of good enoughness. Like how does it work in daily life, right? Does that sound right?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I definitely think that you can see a lot. The practice of the culture of good enoughness comes from really, as I gave this anecdote, these moments of work practices. That is where it comes from. The work practices of good enough have to be looked at through, I think, the everydayness. I wouldn't say that you would do an interview and someone say, I do good enough work. No one would say that, right? And I think that there comes the sovereignty of our method, is like, hey, we listen, but we observe, but we like really digest over a few years what exactly is going on here. And I think I've never, in my like mid-career level, I've never really spent so much time. You kind of joking at the beginning of how long I spent on this book, but I've never spent so much time on a book where I really felt, come at me with this like critique of what good enoughness is, but I really think I observed something going on here. And after years, I've been away from the field now, a few years. For me, it keeps coming back that this somehow makes sense, even from the people from the field itself. And so even this practices like giving when you're doing a code review, reviewers give like +2, and then it really passes. +1 is that like you have to fix something. Then you have -1, -2. And there's this like anecdote that I also give from the field where it's really, there's a practice of good enoughness on Friday afternoon where you're like constantly giving +2s, like, this will fly, because you want to go for beers with your team. And you kind of think, as a user, oh no, they're like +2ing and there's going to be a bug. Yes, there will be a bug, right?
But exactly.
There will be a bug. That's
there
fine.
There will be one anyway. Fucking A.
Yes, exactly. But I want to say, hey, this is coming from somewhere. Your bug is coming from somewhere, and it's coming from a culture of good enoughness. It's not coming just because like one girl just like did that and then went to like hang out with her buds and get some beers. No, there is like constantly a work culture around what you do on a Friday afternoon, right?
Yeah.
In some respects, or what you do in any moment or in team meetings or whatever. So I describe over and over, even through this contention between management and developers, there's all sorts of these little practices that happen, these everyday gestures, moments, I don't know, forms of
that's nice.
Doing things that breed good enoughness in various ways.
Totally. I could imagine like this is not a core part of your method, I would say, but like a real nerdy conversational analysis type, like a quant person, kind of like looking at conversations and organizations and just seeing like these, exactly what you're saying playing out, and in like in very broad ways. So you told us about this company, what this company Middletech, kind of, you've described it a bit, and I think we've set up that part of what you're pushing back against is this like rhetorics of efficiency and optimization and all this shit that flies around. I do want you to tell us how you got onto this company, like how that, how you set up how you set up the relationship. And then the other question is, when I was reading this, I was thinking about like big companies like Microsoft, like services companies like Microsoft and IBM and all, SAP even, like these big fuckers. And I bet there's also like a lot of, I know there's a lot of culture of good enoughness in these, 100%. Right? Yeah.
100%. So, okay, those are two like really good questions. And okay, the first one, I can give the like longer winded answer, but basically, okay, so in anthropology, sociology, whatever, ethnography, for those listeners who don't know, you have something called door opener, who's like your kind of bestie or your good friend who's like, hey, let's study this. And why don't you come into my company, or why don't you come into my world? And you're more than welcome to come in, right? So this is this like buddy of mine who's this Israeli programmer. In the book, he's called Ori. And
okay.
Yes. And he's like, he was my bud. We were in like, he's one of my really dear friends. And he said, first we had a lot of lunches, and like I was then a postdoc at that time, and I was doing like a lot of research with some media studies people, some historians, and I was like, I hate this armchair shit. I need to like get out and really
Amen.
I need to understand these like engineers. We're talking about like algorithms or whatever, big data, and we're like, do you even know what that is? Like, do you even understand how a routing algorithm works? So Ori would have come. I would be the guy. He would be the guy who would be like always like, okay, tell me what this is. Tell me what this is. And then I thought, why don't I like go follow you around at your company? And that's where it got tough because he was like, ooh, how do I explain to like my manager that there's like my best friend who's coming in to like chat and hang out? And what happened is I just was like really annoying. Basically, I was just like, I will not leave you alone. I'm going to come to all your lunches. I'm going to team your lunches. I'll be like this creepy person in the background. And then once the manager came, long story short, the manager came in and I was like, tried to like give my biggest pitch and not let no for an answer. What is it? How do you say that?
Not take no for an answer.
Not take no for an answer. Exactly. So that was like how I got into it. And I also think that I do say that's like my little caveat. I describe the like where the culture of good enoughness comes out in these like middle tech companies and what is a middle tech company. But I do like give a disclaimer that I definitely think the big tech companies or these services companies, as you say, or I would even say these flashy big tech companies, like all the tech people want to or dream of working at the Googles or the Microsofts.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, we even know if anyone watches HBO's Silicon Valley, there's this like wonderful scene of these like, I forgot have you watched this show? I forgot the like character, but he's like demoted to like this position where he's just like hanging out on the roof. Do you remember this? And they're like, there's this group of people that are just hanging out on the roof and they're like not fired. But because you can't just fire them because of some like labor laws or something in their clause. So they're just like hanging out. Like nobody knows where they are. And I've witnessed this at Middletech. There are those people hanging on the roofs. And that's one example of Middletechness of doing absolutely nothing. But that's like the maximum extreme. There's also people giving +2s on a code review and wanting to go for, I don't know, to the workout room at Google. And Google's just so massive, or Microsoft is so massive. And I have talked to the guys who were at that beer garden in Berlin and have left for the big tech companies. I've spoken to them and I've like, does good enoughness exist? And they of course talk about how it does exist in various different ways, that it is alive and well, right? So I definitely think so. I just think that there's, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe middle tech was just interesting for me because we don't hear about these tech companies very much.
Oh, I think there's probably more in those places.
Well,
it was just like,
more,
I just think it's just like, when I was reading it, I was like, well, this is just like such a fascinating phenomenon to think through. But then it was like, well, this is probably everywhere, basically, right? And then, But so then that's really interesting about Ori, because I was going to ask you about Ori, and because in another chapter,
was he your favorite? Was your favorite?
Yeah, he was
in the book.
I love. I had similar writing stuff with the innovation delusion, like writing about ordinary IT people and the shit they face in life is just so beautiful. But I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about, like, because one chapter is really focused on Ori and his work, and I was thinking, like, what is focusing on this character in this chapter kind of allow you to do as a sociologist?
Yes. Well, I try to each chapter, although the Ori chapter is like very, very personal, but there are moments in many chapters that I really try to like personalize it or like bring that to life. And I think there's someone just recently asked me about, this sort of, this is just really about boring technology. Why would people be interested in reading this book? I had some colleague.
Oh my God.
Of mine. I mean, these are just like maybe German journalists or something,
Jesus Christ. It sounds like a German journalist to me.
Like super straightforward, like whatever. This is not that interesting. Please do not read it. Why shall I read it? Right? Like really bad accent.
Yeah.
So that's the like vibe that I got, and I was like, oh yeah, sure, but fair enough. Like, yeah, we're not talking about anything like cool, but I'm just thinking these personal stories are so important because I want someone to have a bug on their phone or in their car navigation system be like, I wonder if someone just went on vacation or something like that. Like, I think it's, instead of like yelling at your car or imagining that it's like, it should be seamless, it should be amazing, it should be awesome. No, like, just give it a break. Like, it's not going to be awesome because someone just went on vacation or need to pick up their kids from school or something.
Yeah.
Like, that's all it is. So the personal stories for me were like, and for you guys, when you're writing about like maintenance work, it is really this care, like who does the care, right? This is about care. And I also talk care and compromise. Who compromises on good enough? Who decides that this is good enough, right?
Yeah.
And yes, it's not only Ori, of course. It's Ori and his team. It's also his management. It's also the customer. There's this like network of stuff.
Sure,
right?
yeah, totally. But, that comes out.
But I wanted to like really just make it somehow lovely to read and give like a closeness and intimacy. Yeah, that was my point.
Yeah, man. Well, I think you gotta hit people in the gut and make
heart.
things. Yes, in the heart. That's right. Yeah.
And the gut, wherever your heart is.
Yeah, man. Somewhere in the torso.
Exactly.
I think that you have to make things visceral for people. And I think the way you do through that is that kind of analysis.
Yes.
But also, I mean, you had this nice thing about the sociality of software, which I thought was very good. And it made me think like all software is compromised, but so much of it is, there's two parts, right? I mean, so much of software is services. So there's like you're dealing with a client or a customer and compromising with them with what's good enough. And then there's the firm side where there's a lot of compromises happening internally between different teams and stuff, right?
Yes.
And I felt like that was another thing that you were able to use Ori like to do, like by focusing on the him and his team and the process they're going through is like how that compromise happens in real life.
Yes, exactly. And the sociality, meaning that it's not just one person. And then there's also the stereotype of like, oh, this hacker in a basement or this like nerd or whatever behind their computer. And that's also the sociality, meaning that there's moments of trust, moments of argument, and of compromise, of like, another thing is even what is beautiful or what works. Like that question, people who don't build software or even non-engineers forget that it's like, there are so many ways of building a system or building a component or solving a problem. There's so many different ways. And to do it one way or another, first is your choice. The other choice is like, it's a culture of doing it, right? It's all together. You have, let's say, a way of writing code, a way of designing, a way of what is right. I found it so interesting that different companies have like standards that have just come about as like a culture of how to do stuff.
That's right.
And so all of that is the sociality, as you talked about, is this like, is the meat of it. It's really, it comes together on that level. It doesn't come together of like one lone wolf ranger or whatever, tech geek, right? So
and that sociality, as you're saying, is full of emotions and what academics call affect, but emotions and aesthetics, like senses of beauty and goodness. So I run this Dungeons and Dads group. We actually don't play D&D, but we play
that's a good band name. I'm looking for I have a new band, and I'm looking for a band name. Maybe I'll
might have to be a little metal.
Dungeons and Dads.
It's mostly IT guys actually, and a farmer, and so. But my one buddy, who is actually one of the characters in Innovation Delusion, he's one of my oldest friends from like 6th grade.
Cool.
He works for a large university in the Midwest, the American Midwest, doing IT, and he'll just pull up code that someone has submitted from some team below where he's at that's just like all fucked up. Like maybe it was like ChatGPT did it, or maybe it was just they don't know what they're doing, but it's deeply aesthetically wrong too. That's when he pulls it up and shows it like screen shares via Zoom. It's like, can you believe this mess? You know what I mean? It's just like it hits at the level of like like moral outrage and aesthetic badness. You know what I mean?
Yes. Like, is this a toddler who messed up their like breakfast plate or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. And he's all about good enough, but there's just like, well, actually, that really sets up the next chapter because you do have like this you want us to appreciate good enoughness and see the goodness of good enoughness. But it's not like you're like saying shit doesn't hit the fan and go totally wrong sometimes, right?
Yeah. It's true. And that was my struggle in this. I mean, when you always build a narrative, there's always like, you also compromise and you're like, does this actually fit? And so I'd say this is like one thing that sometimes didn't always fit into the narrative of good enoughness is like, or at least this is how I kind of made it make sense, is that we always have moments where this isn't good enough and we have to, then that's the sociality, back to your last question, is that we have to constantly compromise. So I talk about this, good enough is no, I have to compromise. Is this really good enough? No, others don't want it to be like this. And this also story, I didn't want it to make it black and white where it was like, the managers are the baddies and they're like wanting everything to be excellent. And then there's Ori who wants to just go for his beers with his friends and like just gives like no shit about whatever. No, it's not like that at all. Right? Like,
Ori cares.
It's also, Ori cares sometimes. And there are many times. And there's also managers who don't care sometimes, or they care in different ways, you know? So I think there's a care in various different ways that actually comes to light and then comes up and down. That there's I think that's important to the dynamics, or let's say the cultures and practices of good enoughness is really about that like dynamics of good enough. What is enough? What is good and what is enough? And when does that rear its head? When does that come to being?
Yeah,
when
that's
does
nice.
Come to light, you know?
Yeah.
And that's also important that we,
Right.
And I think also a manager who I worked with this is a shout out to them if they're listening, is that like, I love you. No, no, just kidding. Revealing.
No, it's real.
No, but they got really sad. They thought, oh, I'm like this baddie. And I don't think management, I hope it doesn't. I don't know. You read the book. The managers, I don't want them to look as baddies. It's just like, there is a narrative of whole business schools. I work at a business school. Like, people will hate in my business school this book. They'll be like, no, we need to work for a good enoughness.
Cultures of excellence.
Cultures of excellence. Oh, that is important. You're in that culture. You have been trained that. That's fine. And you also, there are sometimes very important things about this, like trying to strive for excellence. Don't get me wrong, but there are these forms of compromise, and managers are not baddies, and like engineers are not pure goodies. It's yeah.
I hear you, man. These simplistic narratives are really a problem. And I see it so often, like, I don't know, like, I just have such reservation around like what we're seeing these days around automation and AI and all this shit, where it's like, I mean, look, we can look at like the Screenwriters Guild strike and see that some companies are going to use these things to put downward pressure on wages and benefits and do bad shit. This is typical. We know this, right? But it's not everything in the economy, actually. There's lots of other stories about how these things are going to be adopted into organizations that don't require us to have these kind of very, like, the dumbest kind of Marxist. I'm a Marxist person. I love Marx, you know, but like, the most simplistic narratives about like management versus workers and these kinds of things, you know? And so I think it's really important when we're doing real sociological work, and especially, I mean, all kinds, but I think ethnography draws this out even more, of just not turning people into caricatures, for Christ's sake, and letting the complexity be there, you know?
Yeah. That's also very fair enough, and very much so. And I think, I also work, so this is, I'll comment on this in just a second, just a bit of preamble, and this is, I don't think I'll get into trouble for this, but I work at a very, very elite business school in Europe, and it's like known for this, and it's a business school, I'm in a social science and humanities department that tries to like give a good vibe and kind of be the naysayers a little bit to like the business school, and which is really great that this exists, but I find it tough to, I wonder basically there are these stereotypes of people, of these like business school elites. I see that also on an everyday basis.
Oh yeah.
And I think my students also try, when you're an 19-year-old student or 20-year-old student, you come into like the university, your parents are so excited that you're in there. You're gonna be working for a great consultancy firm when you finish, and you're gonna make millions and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And there's so much pressure on the shoulders of these poor kids, and I keep I hope I'm like the voice. Sometimes I tell them, you don't have to do this. You can like drop out. You can do something else. Or this is not always excellent.
Fuck yeah.
And
yeah.
But the whole, even when you say these black and white, back to your comment, this like black and white, we need to strip that down and we need to say, hey, there's so much more nuances. But there are also young kids who are trying to live into those stereotypes and trying to be those people. And I'm always like, that's like, that exists in some way. And if money exists, but at the same time, not really at all. And please, like, tone it down.
Yes.
And, and like,
it is
take
hard
a
when you
down.
see young people worshiping Musk or Thiel or whoever the fuck it is, right?
Yes.
It's tough.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I mean, I think we have to challenge all this stuff.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard because
hard.
Stereotypes help, like, young kids, I think, give them some sort of direction that this is clear cut, that this is what, if I study here and if I do this, I will be Elon Musk and I will then be this billionaire and everything will be great. And that's like, I just can't believe that young kids still think that. And that's the narrative, but it's there, it's real. And so I think that we need to like chill it down a bit, So, and
I'm
at
a
least
total hippie in this regard too. I'm with you 100%. Yeah.
Yes.
I want to briefly talk about, what managing good enoughness means to you. Okay. And then I have some other questions for you, but yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Tell me about managing good enoughness. How does it get managed?
How does good enough get managed? Yeah, that's also tough, I think, because it is this constant tension, and then you start painting out these goodies and baddies of like, we are the managers and we have to strive for excellence, and then there's these engineers who just want to do whatever they want and they don't get that like this is how it is. And so managing software's good enoughness versus managing good enough, these are two different things. Managing software is good, so the imperfection I think of software is very tough, and you have like Brooks, the Mythical Man Month, like RIP, like wonderful, like legendary book. But this is also like the godfather in some ways of software good enoughness, where you're like, you can't throw more people at a software project. Software projects will always fail. This will always be imperfect. I mean, he said that quite sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, but like, I think that is very, very much prevalent. Also, there's this little bit of like even computer science literature that also talks about this idea of managing developers.
Yeah.
And then you have, I don't know, people who study this, like you have all the ways of managing software development project, like these like waterfall, Scrum, Agile, blah, blah, blah. This is all sort of trying to get the voices, I think, of engineers into management.
Yep.
And engineers somehow don't want to be managers, but you need to get engineers into management so that they actually understand what the project is doing and what's actually happening, so that they can actually push for a more tight deadline, excellent, robust software, blah, 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 blah. So it's, I think, a constant tension that like can't really get resolved, I think, unless people really throw away the management handbooks and are just like, let's see what happens and everything will be fine. But that's not how our world works. That's not capitalism. That there are deadlines, there are customers, there are contracts, there are standards, and there's all this kind of shit that's out there that's like, how do we deal with this? We can't really, or how do we make this go away? We can't, right? Unless we live in a different world. So long story short, that's how problems of managing software. And then I think managing good enoughness in general is, it's down to like what capitalism, no? It's down to, it's tough. It's tough to like, get, because management de facto is about striving for something, no? It's about like creating a deadline, making sure that everything gets finished. So I'd say if you're
you almost always have at least profit, right? Yeah,
it's about also, sure. It's a profit, but maybe managing, if a manager was like, I just want this to be finished in this time, as long as it's good enough. Like, I don't think time excludes good enoughness, if that makes sense.
No, not at all.
Like,
no.
Like, you could be finished and make sure you finish in a few weeks and make sure that 2 weeks or 4 week or whatever 44-week deadline is met, but you can also make sure that it's met in a good enough way, right? So
no, time is essential to good enoughness, actually. I mean, I think that like,
interesting.
at Carnegie Mellon, I was told about this psychological experiment done there, like, I think in the 90s, but it was Carnegie Mellon was, in addition to being, well, because of Herb Simon in some ways, was like one of the the homes of behavioral economics.
Yes.
And one of these guys there was like, well, it was a small team. They were like, all right, what they did is they brought in students, undergrads, to a room, and sitting on the floor was an IKEA bookshelf in a box.
Yeah.
Right? And they're like, tell us how long it's going to take for you to build that thing. Okay? Give an estimate, and then build it. And what they found is no matter what range so some people would say it's going to take me half an hour, and some people would say it's going to take me 3 hours, but whatever estimate they gave, it went over time, basically. And like their argument is that it's like, it may even be like cognitively built into us to kind of underestimate how long it's going to take. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But like when you add that to like the Mythic Man Month stuff, it's like, I think so much of it is driven by last minuteness and like the crunch and all this shit. And it's just like, you got to hand it over at some point and call it done, right?
Yeah.
I think these things are all wrapped up together.
Yeah, that's also true. But also I think that we have had this ingrainedness in us. That's also by education of how our society works, that you want to be awesome, you want to excellent, you want to make it in time. You also imagine that you will be better than what you actually can do because you want to show off that you could do that, or you want to like show off to yourself or give yourself a bar that's much higher than I don't know. So maybe that's, I don't know this Carnegie Mellon study, but maybe there's also something in that.
Well, that's interesting too. Yeah, it connects to like meditation and stuff, and like the kind of selves we buy in, the narratives about ourselves, right?
Yeah,
that we buy into.
Do this fast and great and amazing, and we're gonna do this in 2 hours, and we'll build this bookshelf, right?
Yeah, it creates all this suffering.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to ask you a question about. I mean, I think that also there's this thing about managing expectations, to use that old phrase that's part of the story. But I wanted to ask you about the role of resources in this thing. So, I want to use Virginia Tech as an example. So I know some people in IT here. They're great, good workers, smart folks. So you have some good people. It's also hard to get and keep good people here because we don't pay very much. So people, and especially as like jobs went remote, people were just like, fuck it, I'll work for, a company in California and just live here in Blacksburg. But then, even though you have like, so you have a mix of like, well, I'm just going to talk in this way, like quality of workers, like, but then the university demands these huge fucking projects get done and gives like nowhere near the resources in terms of time, money, people that you would need to do it well.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so I just wonder, like, maybe that wasn't an issue in Middletech, but I'm just wondering if is that something you see play out?
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. This is a very complex question, because on the one hand, good enoughness is about being able to say this is good enough is a privileged position. To be able to say this is good enough, I'm going home. Fuck this, right?
Yeah.
That's like
exactly.
super privileged. Like I think that people who don't, so that's what, back to your point about like the space and time, I think that these R&D departments at like whatever in Mountain View, in Silicon Valley, at the big tech companies, this is where you have like this hyper privilege of like space to play around and see. Now this is not about good enough, but this is like the sort of engineerial privilege, right?
Right.
And so also I'd say, and those who work in these companies, even in middle tech companies, who are able to say, this is good enough, I work in this stable job, everything's fine. Even the labor laws in Germany, which I touch upon in one of my chapters, that's also, you're much more privileged than in the US, where you could just like be fired from day to day.
Yeah.
And in Germany, it's really like, there's a little clause, I don't know if you read this little part, that's so interesting, in the German labor law that talks about that someone can't fire you if they can't expect more than mediocrity from you. And that's written into the German labor laws, that like what you produce has to be of middle quality and value. And I think that's so interesting and brilliant. And so anyways, German labor laws are like, I'm not also a legal expert in work and labor, but they're much more kind of robust and protecting on the side of the worker than I think the German US famously.
Yeah.
So that's also where it bred the space of Middletech, where you like kind of chilled out and had like space to even not be, you won't be fired if you like don't do that. So and they also
that's interesting.
That's important to know that this is a story of a breeding ground. How Middletech came about is really have a mix between labor laws, a mix between company that has an asset that works quite well and that is kind of a cash cow software product and is working for a long time, blah, blah, blah. So there's many different features. So, but back to your point, there are also places where this culture of good enough can't be bred, which is like a lot of, let's say, outsourced companies where you really are in a competitive space where you have zero time and zero resources to do anything else, and you have to deliver really, really quickly, and you have to throw more engineers at it or whatever, really, and you don't have the extreme brains and extreme talent. So the people at Middletech, there was a lot of like PhD dropouts who wanted to just work in tech, but I don't think that that's the same thing from, I don't know, a company at that time. They were outsourcing to Krakow or Bangalore or wherever in a lot of the global south, is that they don't, it's a different world. So I don't know if I answered your question fully, but I think, did I answer it somehow? But it's just like the resources, the space and the resources to create moments of positionality of good enoughness. I think it's very important to understand that privilege,
Yeah, totally. And I like your kind of industrial analysis of why things were specifically like that at that firm, right? And then we could look at a lot of other global ecological niches and, whether it's startup land or it's this, global south stuff, and say, well, it's different there, in some ways and not in others, and like, in startup ways, it's like, the resources were flowing like crazy when interest rates were super low. So, in some way, but then like, anyway, so I like
but
your
there's
kind
a different competition, right? In startup world,
exactly.
that's a very different thing because you want to then be great and compete over the other startups and blah, blah, blah. And your product is not embedded in these kinds of ways. So I do talk about that from, maybe a industrial sociology or like,
Yeah. And I also like, this could feed into collective bargaining and stuff hypothetically down the road, right?
Also,
because like, there are structural reasons why maybe some cultures feel more good enough and sane in that way. And like,
also how unions, like even talking about labor unions for tech workers, that's not always a thing of course, in the US, but like, that's also, it really fights for sort of forms of good enoughness, of being able to like really like not be pushed too hard and not to like, that's also very important.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you also have this project called, I don't know if this is still, I was looking at your webpage today. It was called Researching the Ecological Class, where you were talking about small tech and stuff. Is that something you're still up to?
Yeah, that is something. That's like kind of my next little project.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Okay. You want to hear about my next project? Good. So this is also, I'm looking at entrepreneurs in Switzerland. I'm basically look at like sort of rich Swiss tech entrepreneurs who want to be climate activists. I find it interesting when people want to be climate activists, but not from like a very interesting, like not a very obvious space. Like that's, you're like the lefty and you're like chaining yourself to a tree or going to Fridays for the Future or Extinction Rebellion or whatever. I'm interested in like, and also not the greenwashing story. It's not this corporate greenwashing story.
No.
I kind of call it like accidental activist, but maybe it's not always so accidental, but sort of the emerging kind of contradictions that come out with people who feel very frustrated by the upcoming we're living in a sort of a climate crisis, right? So I'm interested in that, and then I'm interested in people from tech who are grappling with their like libertarian, sometimes right-wing leaning approaches to the world and how they try to build startups. So there's like, I'm following me and my team are following this startup in Switzerland that is doing really, really interesting and very rapidly kind of it's a kind of shocking how much they're changing the Swiss and German and Austrian transport system and trying to force people to use public transport and not their cars. And they're really it's like kind of shocking how much they do. So they kind of use this like audacity that comes from the startup world of like pitching and we can do this now and we could hack things together. And they have these like climate hacks that people come together and all these like CEOs from these dinosaur old kind of transport companies are just like looking boggled that they can actually achieve something so quickly. So it's a story of like different worlds coming together to do something about climate change. And a lot of them don't even want to talk about the climate crisis because that's already a cult and you don't talk about it. So it's how to grapple with doing something for climate change when you're in a kind of unlikely space of like the sort of center right libertarian tech world.
Yeah. And the small tech part, is it like, do they take inspiration from like the small is beautiful Schumacher stuff? What's small tech in this sense?
In this sense, it's more like of how they decided they don't want to be, it's almost like small tech or good enough tech. They don't want to grow. They don't want to like
it's
build
not
a startup.
Scaling thing.
It's not a scaling. It's zero scaling. It's really about, it's not even, it's like degrowth. It's like sort of maintaining the smallness of it and doing a lot at the same time. They don't want to sell their startup. They're just like about no growth whatsoever because they think that that's then goes into the whole VC funding chain. You sell it and then you buy it. It's kind of goes into the entire tech rat race and they don't want to be part of that anymore. So it's not about making money, really.
Very cool. I asked because the design critic and writer Alexandra Lang is doing some stuff on the 70s and has gotten interested in the appropriate technology, like small is beautiful literature.
Interesting.
From that
I should
period.
get into that. Okay.
And I was just like, I was reading your small tech stuff and I was like, it's fascinating. Like there's the moments where smallness comes back as like a maybe even ideal, right?
Yeah. Or small tech is like, the sort of tech movement of degrowth or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it could. The world of sustainability and tech maybe needs the term small tech. I don't know.
And is so is that? Do you have anything else upcoming?
What else is going on?
Is that the center of it?
No, that's the center. That's also it's just hard. It's hard. It's hard to like after your book is done. You're like, what do I do next? But this is getting somewhere. But I'm also interested. Actually, I have another work that I'm working with a computer scientist in my department that I didn't put up on my website. I published my first it's in the review process, but my first computer science paper, which I'm really excited about how engineers use AI tools for their programming. So it's like really about their work practices of programmers in light of AI tools like Copilot, etc. Yeah. And what it does to the engineer and what it does to the sociality of engineering.
Yeah.
So I talked about trust. We published a paper on trust. Yeah.
That's cool, man. And then, it's not out yet, but I interviewed Dana Boyd is starting to pull people together around grounded ethnographic studies of AI in the workplace. And I'm like, thank God, man, that's what we need. You should talk to her about this.
We're both fellows in Frankfurt Oder. There has a really cool, media research center. So I will maybe see her in June. She doesn't know who I am. I'll just like stalk her down and be like,
"Oh, she's very friendly. You should just drop her a note."
Okay, I'll drop her.
Yeah, a note. She's super friendly, and she'll be happy to hear about this. And like, can you say how do that? So, can you just give me a brief picture of how you think about how the technology affects the engineers, the AI technology?
Well,
I think you put it that way, right?
Yes. Sure. Well, okay, so there's different things. One thing is that I thought it was interesting, and this is just what it's hinting at, is that more advanced engineers, this is really helping very advanced engineers.
Yes.
And the basic engineers are really in the dark of how to use it, which I find it interesting, especially now we're talking engineers who do testing, for example, or you've got the new engineer that just came out of the code camp and now have to build something. Sometimes it's quite tricky for them and they don't really know what's going on. The more advanced engineer is more using it, I guess, I don't know, you could even explain this as a BA student writing a paper versus intern versus us, not that we're like super brains, but we're like professors, we kind of know where we can go, what can't, what we can use it for, what doesn't, what is too far, what is not, and what is good enough, what is not. So there is also this culture of good enoughness in using an AI tool that I think people are more well-versed in when you understand various layers and problems within your software system and where you can apply it. Well, so that maybe sounds obvious, but I think at the beginning I thought, oh, okay, this will be great. And
this is an important, I'm glad you say this. I think this is like, I think there are other people finding this right now, like Matt Bean talks about it a lot. I think even the writing guy, John Warner, has talked about this. Maybe even Ethan Mollick has talked about it. But I think it's a very important point that like, who this is benefiting right now is people who have a lot of subject matter expertise. In fact, John Warner and I talk about this in my interview with him, when he's saying like he knows a designer who's using like graphic generative AI tools. But the reason the guy can use it so effectively is he is a master graphic designer, has been working in like advertising world for like decades, right? So like he knows what good is. He can use the tool very fluently. Yes. I think this is a really important finding, actually. So
there's a feeling of what's good. And also, where can you trust? I think what's good is also about like trusting the output of the, that's the nuance of it. And that's where we talked about trust, is that you trust the output, just like you do when you just like chat through into ChatGPT. You're like, do I trust this? Do I have enough? Do I trust myself that I trust this? That's also very important. Do I have enough knowledge to trust this? Do other people know that I use this Copilot tool as an engineer, and are they going to trust my code that I now have pushed to the system? Nice. That's also very important. Like, they could also be like, oh no, Paula keeps using, she's the software engineer in back, she keeps using like Copilot, and this is dodgy, or she hasn't like proofed it. So there's this like constant like sort of checking myself, trust. And I think trust is an important term in this, right? You kind of double check all sorts of things. And that's the like sort of social aspect of it. So I think it's an interesting space to research. I'm just at the stage where I'm like, man, I wish I could be a postdoc again. You know how it is when you're a professor, you're just like, oh man, when am I going to do this field work, you know? And I think I can carve out, and I have a young baby at home. I'm a mom to like a 1.5-year-old.
Oh man.
So I'm just like, that's just the biggest job of all time. So anyways, long story short, I would love to like go to a few companies and spend some time and like observe some people, which I really, really hope I'll do soon. But that's where I'm at. At the moment, I just
embrace good enough, Paula. I mean, you know,
I know, that's how
especially as parents, I think we have to keep this in mind.
Parents have to. That's back to the origins of this term. The good enough parents.
Exactly.
Yeah. And hey, how long is this podcast? Is this like also good enough for your podcast? Or are you like, this is normally an hour? No.
Yeah, man, we did good enough today. Paula, thank you so much for coming on. This was a blast. I knew I was going to have fun with you, but this was like even more fun than I knew I was going to have.
Can I be your co-host?
Yeah, we should do that. If you ever want to talk to somebody, I would love to have you on. I'm actually thinking about there's a couple of things I want to do with Lana Swartz, who might be coming on to like, you know, as like
to be also a co-host. So you already have a co-host. So you're just like saying that's a soft no.
No, that's a hard yes. Okay, if you want to do something and like just have a conversation, I'd love to do it here. Of course.
Yeah, cool. That sounds great.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
Talk to you. Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of our podcast. You can reach us with questions, comments, and suggestions at leevinsel@gmail.com or by following me on Twitter at sts_news or on YouTube at People's Things. Our podcast is distributed by the New Books Network, the leading platform for academic podcasts, so that you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Peoples and Things, like most things in this world, depends on the work of many people. I want to thank my brother Jake Vinsel for writing the music for the show. I want to thank my buddy Juliana Castro for designing the logos for the podcast. You can check out her work at julianacastro.co. Joe Fort is the producer for the podcast, and Mandy Lamb is the production assistant. This podcast and other Peoples and Things programming are produced in affiliation with Virginia Tech Publishing and supported by the Center for Humanities and the University Libraries at Virginia Tech. For information about other podcasts from Virginia Tech Publishing, visit publishing.vt.edu. For the entire Peoples and Things team, I am Lee Vinsel. And most importantly, I want to thank you for listening. Thanks.